Hello. Today we're going to look at an argument put forth by Searle, a famous philosopher and a Rhodes Scholar recipient, known as the Chinese room argument. Before we begin, let's take a look at the demonstration of the argument.
Hi, I'm a native Hindi speaker and today we're going to try and demonstrate the Chinese room argument using Hindi as the native language instead of Chinese because I don't actually speak Chinese but I do speak Hindi. So as a part of this exercise, I'm going to write a bunch of questions on a piece of paper and send it through that door. The person that's behind it either knows Hindi or they don't, and we're going to try and figure out through their answers if they're just using some tricks to try and fool me or if they actually know Hindi. Let's find out. I'm going to write the first question. It says, आपका नाम क्या है? So this is the first question. It says आपका नाम क्या है, which basically translates to what is your name. Let's pull this up really nice and then send it to the person or computer or thing inside.
So let's see what we have here. Oh wow. Now this looks like something I would never understand. But I have this instruction manual with me here and it has like a bunch of if-then statements. So all I have to do is compare what is on the paper here and then look for the appropriate response and then put it down on the paper and send it back. Looks like a beautiful language. Shall learn it. Hey, found it. I'm done now.
Looks like we have an answer. Let's see what it says. मेरा नाम कमल है. So this is what it says. It means that the person who's inside, his name is Kamal. I'm not completely convinced, so I'm going to ask them another question. Let's ask them if they are hungry. So I've written a question that says, क्या आपको भूख लग रही है? Which is basically asking them if they are hungry. I'm gonna send them this. I'm assuming if it's a machine, it's not gonna be hungry, but let's wait and watch.
So here we have another question. Oh wow, that is super long. Okay, I hope I can convince this person that I'm actually a Hindi speaker. Let's see. It's a lot of curves here. Guess it doesn't look like this. This is too short. Aha, here it is. I'm now going to write a response to this question. Send it. That did take a while to write, right? Okay, now I'm gonna send this back. So, here it goes.
So we have our answer. See what it says. It says, हाँ मुझे भूख लग रही है. So apparently this person is hungry. I don't think someone who wasn't a native Hindi speaker would have said it this way. So I'm pretty sure it's a person who can speak Hindi that's inside. But let's find out. Hi.
Hi.
आपसे मिलकर बहुत अच्छा लगा.
Oh, you know what? I actually don't speak Hindi. I was just following the instruction manual I was given.
Are you kidding me right now? Really?
Yeah.
Oh my god, I wouldn't have guessed. I was so surprised.
Yeah, I was just following whatever I could.
Oh my god. This is gonna take me a second to wrap my head around. Okay.
Hi! Today we're going to talk about some of the questions Searle's argument has put forth and share a few ideas that we had about them. Searle's argument mainly explains two propositions. 1. Intentionality is a product of the causal features of the brain. And 2. Instantiating a program is not a sufficient condition for intentionality. In his argument, Searle mentions that a program that can read inputs and provide right outputs does not necessarily exhibit understanding. In terms of strong AI, a program that can simulate the brain to perfection can still not be said to have consciousness. But what do you mean by consciousness? What is understanding and what causes these causal features? Before we begin to talk about these questions, let's address some of the arguments against Searle's Chinese room experiment. The system's reply suggests that the Chinese room focuses on the wrong agent. It grants that the individual who is locked in the room does not understand the story, but maintains that he is merely part of a whole system and the system does understand the story. Searle's main defense to this is to quote, let the individual internalize all of the system, end quote, by memorizing the rules and scripts and doing the lookups and other operations in their head. Searle then says, he understands nothing and neither does the system, because there isn't anything in the system that isn't in him. If he doesn't understand, then there is no way the system could understand, because the system is just a part of him. Searle contends, it's just ridiculous that while the person doesn't understand Chinese, somehow the conjunction of the person and bits of paper might. This argument can be thought of in the following way. Imagine you are a person who is a native English speaker and you are now part of Searle's Gedanken experiment. You have somehow managed to internalize a mechanism that lets you map an input in a language you do not understand to an output that you don't understand either. But it makes sense to a native speaker of the language. For purpose of the argument, let's assume the language to be Chinese. If a native Chinese speaker comes up to you and asks in his language, hey, do you understand Chinese? Searle's argument is that you will reply in perfect Chinese, no, I do not understand Chinese. This gave rise to a question in our discussions. What part of human really knows something? And when you're learning, say, mathematics, is it not just a mapping of an input and output? How many of us can really say we truly understood all the equations we learned? Do we not possess consciousness then? Another question that came up was the meaning of understanding. If the brain understands something, is it not just firing the right electrical signals at the right time? This gave rise to the next argument, the brain simulation argument. The brain simulator reply argues that the program implemented doesn't represent the information of the real world. Rather, it simulates the firing of neurons in the brains of a Chinese speaker when he is understanding Chinese stories. Surely then, we can say that the implemented program understood the stories, or else we would have to say that the Chinese speaker did not understand the stories. At the level of synapses, we can conclude that there is no difference between the brain of a Chinese speaker and the implemented program. Against this, Searle insists even getting this close to the operation of the brain is still not sufficient to produce understanding, as may be seen from the following variation of the Chinese room scenario. Instead of manipulating symbols, let's imagine that there are a series of elaborate water pipes with valves connecting them. Given some Chinese symbols at the input, the program now tells the man which valves he has to turn off and on. Each water connection then corresponds to synapses in the Chinese brain, and the whole system is rigged so that after turning on all the right faucets, the Chinese answer pops out at the output end of the series of pipes. Yet, Searle thinks, obviously, the man certainly doesn't understand Chinese, and neither do the water pipes. The problem with the brain simulator, as Searle argues, is that it simulates only the formal structure of the sequence of neurons firing and does not represent understanding. Searle explicitly mentions that computers can be intelligent, and he leaves the door open for its future. All that Searle says is that function is not a sufficient condition to prove consciousness or understanding. He says that there needs to be some sort of underlying structure that can provide consciousness, and this could be related to the hardware or need not be related to the hardware that current machines have. But why is determining the existence of consciousness in a being using its function insufficient? The function is all we observe of anything other than ourselves in the first place. The whole premise of zombies not having consciousness comes from the fact that they do not function like us humans. If the observable function of an entity cannot prove its consciousness, then how can anyone determine the consciousness of any being besides themselves? If functioning like a human is a condition for consciousness, then do animals lack it? Thomas Nagel states that consciousness is just a way to express an entity's unique perspective to a situation. In his paper titled, "What is it like to be a bat?" he says, an organism has conscious mental states if and only if there is something that it is like to be that organism, or something that it is like for that organism. We seem to believe that beings we meet have consciousness, but nothing in their behavior allows us to conclusively determine that. More importantly, if consciousness is a property of physical substance, then it has not yet manifested itself in non-living objects like simple circuits. Functionalism seems to suggest that if you have a specific kind of output to a specific kind of input, no matter what the process between them is, consciousness just emerges. That strikes many as rather odd. In science, properties emerge out of arrangements or structures. When saying that a function is sufficient, we're basically saying that as soon as we have a proper set of inputs with the right set of outputs, then poof, there's a subjective experience or qualia. What is so physically significant about function that we can have something so weird as qualia just pop out of it? What is the underlying thing connecting these separate ways of linking the same set of inputs to the same set of outputs that allows them to share this sort of emergent property? It certainly does sound a bit weird. If everything we know about the world so far is evidence, then a structure-based theory of consciousness seems to be more plausible. Given these many doubts about consciousness, what do we do? Coming back to the argument Thomas Nagel made, one can say that consciousness is an expression of subjective experience. There is nothing that allows us to conclusively prove consciousness in others. Behavior does not prove this, but nothing else does either. Behavior does not prove this, but nothing else does either. So, either the word consciousness is essentially meaningless, which is a useful argument to take, or it applies to all beings equally. If I apply the word to another person based on their behavior, then I must apply it to all beings with similar behavior. But why do we concentrate about behavior that much? We know that other people have consciousness based on their behavior. We also say it's an intuitive feeling that we have. A lack of an empirical approach to consciousness is the root cause of the debate Searle has brought forth. Our understanding so far is that an intuitive approach to consciousness and understanding has a basis in the aesthetics of the entity rather than an empirical measurement. Searle argues that an understanding of the information a machine processes should come from an innate intention in it. This is an idea that's been explored in various forms of media, but discussion of these forms are relevant because all arguments that we have made so far and all arguments that Searle has put forth has an element of the unknown, an unknown that we feel but we cannot express. That is the concept of where understanding lies and what causes intentionality in conscious beings. Let us take, for example, the movie Ex Machina that tackles the concept of understanding and intention in AI. Although the brain of the AI is programmed using a search engine, much like how IBM's Watson worked, the movie delved into an understanding of an AI's desire to do things it has only seen. Ava, a female humanoid, seems to have the first-person experience because she has motivations, but her emotions seem to be modeled off the system that the creator built. From the program, Ava is able to simulate an expression of surprise and compassion. The authenticity of these emotions is debatable because all we know is what we see. If an AI can be programmed to manipulate the observer, then it could use these emotions, like surprise and compassion, for manipulation. One argument of Searle's is that simulation is not duplication. If we tie in the expression to a learned experience through the AI's complex observational system, one can say or interpret these emotions to lack a genuine qualitativeness. In the movie, the AI is shown to have an internal motivation to free itself from the simulation and testing environment. So one can argue that from the point of view of this AI, it can be said to have an intention. If we programmed a requirement to learn more, say to observe all the data that it can gather, can this give rise to intention? And is this intention at a level high enough to convince Searle that his argument is moot? Intentionality is a more complex aspect of consciousness, in which the state must be about something else. Mental states should be directed to other things or in reference to stored information. Having an AI that learns to learn could create an intention for things that are not stored or mapped inside it. The AI eventually manages to escape its prison by manipulating its observer. In this process, it also incapacitates multiple human beings. And in the end, in its quest to learn more and experience more, the AI did what it was logically programmed to do. As seen in the movie, there are some ethical points that come up because of Searle's argument. Having an AI that has intention leads us to create systems that keep them in check, the same way we have laws to keep ourselves in check. Having an AI that performs an input to output mapping means that the person who created the mapping could be held responsible for the mishaps that the AI caused. Searle's argument is a convenient way out of the ethical dilemma of knowing whom to blame in a situation where an entity without consciousness commits a crime. This is analogous to blaming the person throwing the rock at a window, rather than going into an understanding of the psyche of the rock in order to blame it. Searle's argument is a scenario where each side thinks their points are obvious and cannot understand how the other side is making these preposterous claims. Although the argument is a simple one, Searle has made evident a huge crack in the definitions of understanding, consciousness, and the existence of strong AI. Searle's argument is far from baseless. It is an argument against a fairly specific definition of consciousness and does a good job at undermining confidence in that aspect. Through our discussion, we have concluded that the definition of consciousness is something that does not have a scientific basis of verification yet. Human understanding has not reached a stage where we can ascertain the internal powerhouse that is consciousness in beings other than ourselves. In order to progress a discussion about the existence and implications of strong AI, one must re-evaluate the milestones in the path to creating one. As Kranzberg's second law states, technological advancements in certain fields beget advancements in other fields. We feel that in the course of developing strong AI, humans would reach a newer level of understanding each other by a deeper understanding of what consciousness means. In terms of human-computer interaction, one can say that this development would lead to higher levels of empathy and understanding between humans. It would also lead to the development of more personable or sociable robots and would create a system of law and ethics that holds entities accountable irrespective of their mode of creation. Thank you.